to give you a very quick overview of who's on the panel. I think there are representatives of most of the sections here which can probably produce this required step change in the evolution of the sector. I'll start furthest with Ms. Wallace, who represents maybe certainly one of the leading developer groups on a Pan-African basis, R&B Westport. They've made very significant investments into Nigeria, but the region more widely and across the continent. Ifeoma is from the IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group, and I think her organization has the ability to answer some of the questions which were raised earlier today in terms of filling the funding gap, and is able to work across sectors and supply on a commercial basis down to specific projects. Mimi is an old friend. Her family established the preeminent industrial estate in Nigeria, going back to Chief Lawson in 1955, acquiring, I think, close to 1,000 hectares of land west of Lagos, and they currently maintain what is the leading estate in the country. We've been working for 10 years in this country, and we're concentrating on the industrial sector. I think maybe in reverse order, Nidhi, if you don't mind giving a little bit more of an introduction to yourself, please.
So as Rory explained earlier, I work with Barra Estates Limited, so it is the first commercial development which is actually just about to be launched, which is going to take into account an office development, a health centre, and a hotel. And our aim really is to have an estate that is self-sufficient in terms of requirements for the industries on the estate, and that does include warehousing, as has been discussed earlier.
Thanks. I'm Ifeoma, as Rory said. I work with IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. So we focus on investment and advisory services to the private sector. In terms of investment, this panel is relevant because we're looking at growing our investments in the industrial segment. We have not done much in Africa in that segment. Thank you.
Wallace Wilkins from R&B Westport. We, a private equity firm, investing in real estate in Africa, and we've invested significantly in Lagos already. We were part of the original Ikeja Mall. We've also done the Circle Mall down on the Lekki Express, and we recently finished the Wings project, the office complex of 27,000 square meters. We haven't done any industrial developments yet, but we're very keen to get into that market. And the way we go about it is usually to form joint ventures with local partners to invest in these asset classes. So we're very keen on this, and I think this is one of the areas that is going through that process of formalizing the market, as we said earlier.
Wallace, thank you very much. It's almost an impossible reality that we face when we have such a large city, and this is thinking it's in the southwestern context, but we have in Nigeria such a dearth of a supply of acceptable standard warehousing. If we go out to Okota or along the Papa-Shodi Expressway, there's some warehousing, and it generally does not allow for the storage of perishable goods whatsoever. So apparently there's an equation where 70% or so of all agricultural produce from the north and even surrounding regions is spoiling before it can actually get to an end user. This is an equation that has to be solved, and ultimately was work that the Emc Re have done for manufacturers such as Procter & Gamble, GlaxoSmithKline, Unilever.
Sure. Rory, I think the important thing for us is to be able to deliver a bankable product at the end of the day that can be financed and can be developed at those levels. And I think what you're trying to say on the left-hand side there is that those kind of rates, nobody will be interested in developing any of these facilities. I think it boils really down to the question is, what is it? Is it just storage facilities that you want to build, or is it part of a logistics network and infrastructure that you want to build? And building a logistics facility is going to cost you a lot more because there's a lot more involved in it. I think those are the critical things. We will work on a yield basis, and to derive those yields, those are the kind of rentals that we will have to get from tenants, but not for storage, but for logistical warehouses, and I think that's crucial. I think the other thing that leads to that is the operational excellence that goes with it and the operational efficiencies. Again, you have to develop these kind of warehouses in areas that fits into the whole value chain of logistics. Again, it's not just storage. It has to have certain efficiencies with certain operational standards that can deliver warehousing in the modern era. And I think that's the game change that we're looking for in terms of this space. I mentioned earlier the whole thing of a bankable arrangement. And really what it boils down to is, obviously it's the rentals, but it's also the tenure of the tenant that we can look at. Multinationals has gone out and built their own facilities in this environment purely because they couldn't find what is available. So there's this mindset of the tenants and companies out there that they have to invest in their own facilities rather than lease these facilities. Purely from an operational perspective, the security of what they get from that, and they can manage those facilities much better. So I think that mindset that we're looking at, the change that we're looking for in this environment is specifically tenants to make the shift from company-owned, we call it, in other words, where they invest in their own facilities versus lease facilities. But I think that the market has to change as well and bring those facilities to the market that fits with the international standards.
Is fundamental, and this leads on also to the involvement of government and the creating an effective interface between government and the private sector. And I think we all agree that we've seen considerable improvement on a state basis, maybe not so much on a federal basis, in Nigeria. More regionally, there are considerable advancements in Ghana. If you visit Takoradi, you see this conjunction of rail, road, sea transportation, all being upgraded significantly by government intervention, and then the private sector, groups such as Black Ivy and Rendever coming in to support those efforts. Tema, in its proximity to Accra, also sees some very advanced logistics warehousing. Accra Airport sees a Swiss port, which has, as I understand it, my colleague Edward has visited, has handling equipment which is unsurpassed across the continent. So regionally, some of these evolutions are coming into play, but there is very much a question of how, more broadly, and in Nigeria in particular, this can be brought about. I think
there's a lot to be said for what is available again in the market, but I do believe that to get to the point where we're talking international standard warehousing and logistics centers, I think there are a couple of enablers that we require to come together to mobilize.
I'd just like to add, still on this slide, about how major investor and developers groups can be convinced there's sufficient returns. I think the first thing before developing a logistics park is to establish what the market failures are, so that you see whether this is the appropriate tool to deal with the market failures. There are certain market failures that cannot be addressed by a logistics park. For example, if there are port and airport delays, that's the key problem, maybe tax, political stability, roads, that's where government will step in. And if they do step in, there are some areas that, for example, if it's a free trade zone, that could be addressed, like bureaucracy issues, red tape for operations. Then, maybe if it's not a free trade zone, it's just a logistics park, you have to live with that, but you can benefit from other aspects like economies of scale, working with joint infrastructure like power, telecom, sharing market information, etc. And I think once it's known that the issues are the ones that can be addressed, such as power, you can now go back to the basics, do a demand survey, because it has to be demand for the facilities, then go back to the fundamentals of any sustainable investment and just check that it can be profitable. I think that's the best way. I don't think you can impose, say, this is an area you must build a logistics park. There's a lot of pre-work and analysis that needs to be done.
I'd just like to add, my colleague Rory mentioned Ghana and Swiss port. I think that the Ghanaian government really had a policy of trying to create a air cargo handling hub in Accra for the wider region. And the private sector did come in, and I think about $400 million is being invested, not just in Accra, but in the other airports. The Swiss port is, and part of that finance is also done by the African Development Bank. So it's interesting that where sort of banks, these multinational organization banks can come in to actually bring in the finance. Swissport built the 10,000 square meter modern logistic facility at Accra Airport, which is, I believe, is the first automatic sorter retrieval system in Africa, which can handle 2,000 pallets. It also has refrigerated and temperature control facilities. And they also have a vault for the gold, to store gold and to transport it. The market, I believe now they have contracts with DHL, so DHL is now using that, I believe, as their primary handling center. Turkish Airlines and KLM also using that primarily. So I think if the facilities are there, definitely the private sector or users will definitely come in.
I think there's huge pent-up demand across the Indian manufacturing segment here, the indigenous groups, the Lebanese. Unfortunately, there's very little left of the Western manufacturing groups that used to be here, or, for instance, the Northern textile industries. All of these, I think, can quite easily return. There's some very interesting developments in Chicago itself, where goods are being manufactured to truly international standards, and heavy goods can then be exported again. The infrastructure is beginning to come back again, and you are getting these non-pioneer centres, hubs, growing up in around Lagos once more. I think there's only some additional assistance which is required from dollar financing, for instance, in conjunction potentially with free trade zone status, but absolutely an improvement within ground infrastructure, but also flight hubs. We cannot even get to Dakar from Lagos directly. If you can fly roses from Kenya into Paris, you should certainly be able to fly them from the proposed regional airport at Chicago to Paris.
So I think government can also help in that, or at least, by providing some of the data. I think, and also what I mean by data is, if we could have simple topical survey that are produced so that investors can know, okay, this is the right place. So basic soil tests, etc., things that investors have access to. It makes it much easier for the private sector to then make that decision. I think we've had a lot of experience in Flowergate scheme in just outside Chicago, and some of it that's where some of the challenges are, because if we don't have those sort of ready available data to present, those investors then find it more difficult to make that decision. It just creates an exodus. So it's not just the infrastructure, but I think those soft things need to be sorted out as well.
I agree with Vivi and Edward on how important the government is. Even within the World Bank Group, we have what we call a cascade strategy, where we say that we will work with the government to de-risk the private sector, but we still feel the private sector is the engine of growth in emerging markets. So even while the government needs to support, the private sector needs to move on forward. And one of the reasons we feel, or some of the reasons we feel the private sector is key is because the government has limited resources to implement these types of programs. And secondly, the private sector always goes in to make profit, sustainable operations and profit. And ultimately, this profit benefits the economy. So even though the government can play a role de-risking, maybe improving the investment climate, providing certain infrastructure, we still feel the private sector should, lead in this effort. And this is where IFC comes in. And I'm talking of other regions. So whenever we come into a project like this, the way we could assist is share knowledge. For example, if we saw something work in China, the Philippines, Bangladesh, make sure it's appropriate so that we can copy some models within the region that have worked. As mentioned, Rory also alluded to it, our World Bank colleagues engage with government directly, and as I said, we have this our cascade strategy where we work together. So they have been involved in a lot of demand surveys where they assess the demand for these facilities so that you can right-size the projects. So in that situation, we can engage with our World Bank colleagues and work together on projects that have a little bit of a government component and then driven by the private sector. And of course, we can provide financing. It's based on good credit analysis. So while we do not invest in projects that are not good credit, sometimes if there is a temporary market failure, we can come up with structures that support the project while the market improves.
Is one of the biggest headwinds to good quality development in any real estate segment in Nigeria. It's very good to see organizations like yourselves being able to begin to break some of that headwind down.
The infrastructure we can create, we can deliver these products at the end of the day. It really boils down to, again, is there a demand for these? And we believe there is a demand for these products, but it's getting to the correct price point of these and what you deliver at the end of the day. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Well, thank you. And indeed, the MCRE's own experience over the years here is that this demand is absolutely proven. Multinationals are having to divert funds from their core business into custom building these facilities, and where their initial preference, their overriding preference is for these to lease good quality warehousing in the market. Invariably they come to us, they ask us, please find us warehousing meeting these specifications and these standards, and we cannot source those products, therefore they go and build at great expense, and unfortunately some of those projects have foundered because they don't have the capital to deploy, so their expansion plans are therefore constrained. It really is a case, this I think truly is this sector is a real case of build it and they will come. And what we're trying to elicit out from, and it would be very interesting to hear of how people in the audience perceive this issue, but how we solve this issue, because there is very proven demand in the segment. The returns probably surpass the returns in any other real estate segment.
I assume that some of these costs have factored in things like free trade zone incentives and various other things that would actually minimize your final build pricing.
This specific model has not factored in any of those, so you can derive a little bit of a lower cost to it. I think the challenge still lies in these fees are usually excluded from the free trade aspects, because that's usually the company that gets the benefit at the end of the day in terms of their taxes coming as a tenant, and not so much in terms of the construction side of things, but there will be a portion there. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you, that helps. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a couple of minor points. Number one, if you are actually building in a free trade zone, then you don't have to pay things like withholding tax and VAT. So you do actually, your build price is slightly cheaper. The other thing is that maybe we need to do a little bit more, for want of a better phrase, joined up thinking. When you look at where the government is actually trying to do work on, say, the rails, and maybe actually figure out where the rail lines are going to run. Perhaps we need to be looking at land at the end of those particular rail runs, because then it might work with respect to getting the goods from point A to point B. I do know, and this is anecdotal a bit, so somebody may need to correct me if I'm wrong, but I do recall that in the past regime in Kwara State, when the Kwara State government decided that actually they wanted to entice the farmers in, what he did was he actually upgraded his airport to an industrial airport and provided industrial property at the airport, so that the farmers could get their goods to the airport and the storage could be correct. So maybe we need to stop thinking, Lagos or close to the ports per se, for this good style warehousing, and actually figure out, okay, if we can get it from a warehouse that is closer to the point of manufacture and find a way either by rail or by from local airports to Lagos airport and then straight out the ports, that might be another way to look at it. So that we've got to try and get away as much as possible from the idea of government, because in the rest of the world, I don't really see them actually doing very much at the moment for reasons that have been given. So perhaps we in the private sector can think a little bit more about finding out what they're trying to do and then linking what we need to what they're actually doing rather than waiting for them. So just a minor point.
Delivering these products. And it will take to look for places that has the infrastructure, but that is underutilized. So that's an option that we can do.
My name is Chimra. I just have a quick question concerning, from your experience, how has the free trade zones worked? Because I know this panel is supposed to be talking a little bit about that, but I understand what has gone successfully so far in Ghana, it seems. I don't know if that Swiss project you've been talking about is a free trade zone, but if it's not, if it is, let us know. But I'm also curious from Nigeria, because I've gotten mixed feedback, where sometimes there are a lot of promises made, and the reality is quite far from what the initial mindset or the ideas are. So from your experiences, how has it been, and are there any steps being put in place to elevate the issues there? And what are your takes on the new free trade zones that are being put in place, such as the Lakey one, of course I think the Atlantic is one. Just curious to know from your experience what you've seen.
To answer the first question, Swiss sport is not a free trade. But I think there has been mixed success in West Africa with free trades. I mean, they're not new anyway. Lomé, I think, has been successful with Freeport. In Nigeria, since 1992. I think the first one was Calabar free zone. Limited success there. I think it's about 19 or so operational free trade zones in Nigeria. A number under construction. I don't think they delivered, like you said, what we thought they would, what was promised. I think there's a number of factors that we're earlier discussing. I think one of the things is the free trade zones are not really specialized in one kind of industry. Really, they just are free for everybody. Whatever industry just goes there. We've seen the success in the oil and gas free trade in I think that's been quite successful. I think because it's sort of specialized in oil and gas, everything linked to oil and gas. So I think also we discussed earlier, and one of there is an issue between obviously there's tax incentive, custom duty incentive for the free trade zone, but there has been some sort of difficulties in the interfaces in the agencies, the federal revenue, customs, and so until those things also got right, because we look at TANAPA as an example where that was supposed to be a free trade zone, and it was that issues, and now it's almost I guess it's not really operational anymore. So I think one of the major reasons that it's been less successful in Nigeria is I think that those tax issues have to be really addressed because that's why people want to go there. They want the custom duties, the zero, the VAT withholding tax, etc. But if you don't have a situation whereby it's quite clear that you're not going to have a situation where you get one approval from one agency and another agency compensates with different things, and people are not really going to feel there's an incentive to be there.
Thanks, Edward. And with secondary free trade zone, for instance, I think many of us are aware of the difficulties between the federal, state, Chinese components, the local community, which has unfortunately held its development up. But again, it does sound as if there are great improvements. Kellogg's now have an operating ban. This was quite unimaginable, maybe even 4 or 5 years ago. It is a work in progress, but I think ultimately will probably deliver real returns, and these will become absolutely essential components to sustain a city of the size of Lagos. I think we've run out of time, so thank you indeed.
Thank you.